Hello, hello. Welcome everybody to today's Givebutter webinar. If you are looking for how to build powerhouse partnerships for your nonprofit with companies and foundations, you came to the right place. Good news. We're going to start this webinar in 2 minutes. We're going to play a little music while everybody rolls in. But while they do, we'd love to know, where are you zooming from today? Let us know your location in the chat. We'll see you guys in a couple of minutes. Hello, hello, and welcome to today's Givebutter webinar. Thank you so much for joining from all over the US today. So fun to hear where you're all zooming in from. I am your host for today's webinar, Rachel Mills, and I'm streaming to you live from Kalamazoo, Michigan. In today's webinar, we have two very, very special guests who are going to be sharing how you can build powerhouse partnerships with companies and foundations for your nonprofit. But first, before we dive in, a couple of housekeeping items. The format for today's webinar is going to be a table discussion through tons of exciting and interesting different topics about today's webinar. So we'll start with welcome and intros, then we'll focus big picture on social impact partnerships, and then kind of zoom in on some takeaways for you on how you can actually cultivate strong relationships with foundations and companies. And as always, we're going to end with live Q&A. So if you have questions that you want answered live at the end, please be sure to use the Q&A feature below instead of the chat. However, we love feedback in the chat, so please continue to let us know what you're thinking, what questions you may have, what this ignites or sparks for you. And of course, we welcome all the emojis and pun use. We're Givebutter. You know us. We love this. Please continue to use that. Kate is here from Customer Success. Thank you so much, Kate, for helping out. She's going to be answering any and all of your Givebutter related and specific questions. And if you're hoping to continue the conversation after today's webinar, we have the perfect place for you. So comment why if you're already in the Givebutter fam. If you have no idea what I'm talking about, that is Givebutter's private Facebook group. There are over 500 fundraisers just like you who are there talking about what they're celebrating, their successes, what they're struggling with, what they could use help with, questions they have about Givebutter. So if you're looking to get connected with people from today's webinar and past webinars, that would be a great place to connect. So like I said, I'm your host, Rachel Mills. I am streaming to you from Kalamazoo with Givebutter's marketing. And since I was 16, my mission has been help others, help others. Honestly, people a lot like you, everyday fundraisers who are changing the world. So thank you for what you're doing. For over a decade, I have been working with large nonprofits that serve kids like United Way, World Vision, Big Brothers Big Sisters, communities and schools, and more. And I'm also a really passionate mental health advocate. I'm a limited licensed professional counselor. I would love to connect with you after today's webinar. Feel free to add me on LinkedIn at Rachel Mills CMP or shoot me an email at rachel@givebutter.com. Speaking of Givebutter, if you are not familiar with the platform, Givebutter is the world's leading online fundraising platform built to help you raise more, pay less, and give better. Givebutter is powering over $100 million in donations every year for more than 35,000 good causes like yours. We get asked a lot, what's up with the name Givebutter? And honestly, it's a valid question. To us, Givebutter simply means a better way to give. What's better about Givebutter, in my personal opinion, it's free, it's easy to use, and it's downright fun. If you've used the platform, you know exactly what I'm talking about. All the gifts in the live supporter feed, that is my favorite feature. Let's connect after if you don't know what I'm talking about so I can show you more. Just go to givebutter.com if you're looking to learn more about Givebutter. So that's me, that's Givebutter. What about you? What good causes are you representing on today's call? We'd love to know what nonprofits or causes that you're working with. Speaking of people who are changing the world, one of our panelists today is Emily Kane Miller. Emily, welcome. She is based in Los Angeles, California. She is the founder and CEO of Ethos Giving. She supports companies who are committed to moving the needle with their philanthropy. She has deep experience in government, advocacy, nonprofit, corporate, philanthropic work. She has the unique ability to envision and steward philanthropic contributions that maximize benefit and value for all. Emily, thank you so much for joining us.
Delighted to be here.
Anything that I missed that you want to share about yourself with everybody?
No, I'm really looking forward to digging into this conversation. I am a huge believer and evangelist of partnerships and especially corporate social impact partnerships, and I can't wait to dig in.
Awesome. So happy to have you here. And Susan, we're happy to have you here too with Women Aware. Thank you for the incredibly important work you're doing as well. We also have Rachel here, who is based in Chicago, Illinois. She is the president of Leading Healthy Futures. She has nearly 15 years of experience writing successful grants for health and human services nonprofits. Since 2018, get this, over 83% of grants written by Rachel and her team were awarded, amounting to more than $25 million. Million. Yes, you heard me right. Rachel, thank you so much for joining us today.
My pleasure. I write a lot of large federal grants for health and human services organizations. So that's how some of those, bigger multi-year awards come in, but always happy to work with smaller organizations just getting started in grants. And a lot of them are probably joining us today to learn about how they can get their feet wet and build relationships with foundations. So
incredible. Thank you again for joining with us today. So excited to hear both of your unique perspective and insights into partnerships in general for nonprofits. What an exciting topic. There is so much that we can dig into, which is why we're doing a two-part panelist roundtable with you both today, because there are just so many questions that we've got that we'd love to address to help everybody on this call build powerhouse partnerships. So starting with part one, we are going to explore the importance overall of social impact partnerships. So Emily, I'm going to start with you. What would you say they are? What are they for those that aren't really familiar with that language?
Absolutely. So I wanted to give a little bit of history before we jump into social impact. So corporate social responsibility, or CSR, you can give a Y in the chat if you've ever heard of that nomenclature. Corporate social responsibility as a term has been around since the 1950s. And there was an economist that put that on the map. His name is Professor Bowen. He was amazing. And he had all of this really detailed information about how corporations could make this work true and real within their organization and have it be really led and meaningful. Unfortunately, we took the term that he coined, CSR, but we didn't take all the work that backed it up. And so for many, many years, for decades, companies have had some formation of a CSR department. They've called it many different things. Sometimes it's engaged around environmentalism and sustainability. Sometimes it's engaged around community-based donations and corporate philanthropy. Sometimes it's done really great work. Sometimes these organizations have not done great work, and there's actually been some good washing involved with what these represented within corporations. So all of that is real and true. I want to zoom us to today, to 2021, and where I really think social impact is going. I think we've had an issue in the sector with a lack of organization, a lack of training, a lack of clarity around what this work means and can look like. Social impact is the leading edge of corporate CSR. They're corporations who say, we as an organization identify that we have something that we want to create in the world that has social good, and we can't do it ourselves. We have to do it with partners like government, nonprofit, community leaders, and we want to come to the table in a partnership model, not in a passive, let me write a check and give me a report once a year, let me know how it goes way, right? But like a real deep model where you can pull a lever on the nonprofit side, the corporation can pull a lever on the corporate side, and the world gets better because everyone's playing their part and they're not doing it in silos, but doing it together on purpose. And I think that that is social impact in its best form. And what I'm excited to dig into today on how that, how that comes to be, and number two, how you can help hold yourselves and your partners accountable to make this work more impactful.
Yeah, thank you so much for kind of zooming out and helping us pull back and remember its roots. That's super helpful. So why would you say that they matter?
Absolutely. So, we all, and looking on the chat where people are from and some of the work that you all are doing, I know that I am preaching to the preachers. The world needs fixing, and we have so many issues in society that are in need of support, financial, institutional, and so forth. Social impact partnerships, like the ones that I described, really help tackle those problems head on with a strategy and a plan, versus the more passive models that I think are historically where we came at corporate philanthropy through, that maybe wasn't as targeted. You had a cause du jour. This quarter we're doing this quarter we're doing that. Next year it may be something else. That sort of work isn't impact work. I'm not saying that it isn't, potentially beneficial, or that there isn't a positive outcome, or that people who are, executing that work aren't doing it from a place of altruism and kindness. But social impact partnerships matter because they're more effective. They actually are looking at root causes. They're looking at results. There are KPIs associated with metrics. We often say with our clients, if it isn't measured, it isn't managed. And if it's not managed, it doesn't matter, right? Mm-hmm. Like, what are we doing here, people? So the social impact partnerships matter because I think that they actually create effective change in communities. And I would also argue one of the reasons that this work is becoming more popular and more important is that your boardroom cares, your financiers care, right? The places where you get your loans, your talent acquisition pipeline cares, your employees, your current employee base cares, your customers care that this work is real. And social impact partnerships deliver in a better way for all of those organizations. So it's better for society because the work is more value add. It's also better for all of the people who are calling you to say, what are you doing on this issue? Or, tell me what's going on with your CSR, your ESG, your social impact metrics, whatever the language is that people are using. It's one thing to say, oh, well, we did a few things last year and here's our data and we shared it in a pretty report, versus we sat down together and decided what we wanted to do. We came up with a framework and a plan. We did it. It didn't always go right. And we got back to the table and we figured out how to make it better. And here's the work. Here are the results. And when you sit down with a potential person, if you're a company in your, any of those partners that I just described, and you talk about your social impact work, they're going to be more excited. It will animate them more. And I think that's what today's corporate leaders know they need to do. And people aren't really sure how to get there. So to the point of this call, to the extent that you on the nonprofit side of the house can be that partner who helps to illuminate what's possible, helps the corporate partner to understand why a long-term strategic partnership is going to be better in accomplishing not only society's goals and the nonprofit's goals, but truly the corporation partner's goals. I think that this is really a much more strategic play to help you effectuate more meaningful long-term engagement and financial support from your corporate partners. So it matters on literally every single box that I know everyone on this call wants to check. I would hitch my wagon to this star every time.
I love that. So many nuggets in there, Emily. Thank you for sharing that. Like, wow, I need to go grab my notebook and write that down.
There's a blog, Rachel, that I wrote. So there's a cheat sheet on the Givebutter website.
You knew I needed it. Thank you. Thank you. So part of what I hear you saying, Emily, is like amplifying good, right? Like we're amplifying good on every level when we participate in social impact partnerships, and that's why they matter.
Yeah.
Yeah.
100%.
So speaking of amplifying good, Rachel, I'm wondering, are there other types of partnerships that come to mind for you besides the ones that Emily just discussed?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, certainly, coming from a grants background, foundations are one of the big ones in the social impact sphere. Of course, when you think about partner organizations that want to make a social impact, that's exactly what foundations do, right? So their entire purpose is to give their funding away for social impact, to give their funding away to organizations that will further their foundation's mission. And there, there's a lot of different types of foundations out there. When Emily was talking about sort of root causes and strategy, there's different levels of sort of sophistication and targeting of impact in different types of foundations. But we've got, the small family foundations, we've got big national foundations, health conversion foundations. Some of you might be familiar with those come from the sale, the proceeds of a sale of a nonprofit hospital and are to be used for the same community that hospital had been served by. Community foundations, they serve a specific municipality or jurisdiction, really for the benefit of those who live within that community. And of course, there's foundations that kind of a little bit of overlap with what Emily's talking about. There's foundations that are actually the giving arm of a corporation. So a lot of different types of foundations, but they are all really out there for social good, whether or not they sort of have a more narrowly defined mission or sort of are the type of foundation that's being super strategic in terms of targeting its funding towards those root causes that Emily talked about, varies a lot from foundation to foundation. But of course, I don't want to ignore other types of partnerships, right? So we've talked about corporations and foundations, but there's a number of different partners that you might consider when you're thinking about how can you build relationships for greater social impact. Government was something that I think Emily touched on really briefly, but government's a big one that comes to mind. They can both be great sources of funding, grant funding, or contracts, but also government can potentially give you access to, or introductions to other partners, to other types of resources. They may help you advance or legitimize some of your programs if you've got a government partner. So that's a really important one for grants and for other types of relationships. Academic institutions and researchers can be really important partners or relationships to have. They can provide access to funding streams that a nonprofit might not be eligible for, that might only be for academic centers. And they can also often provide some technical assistance or evaluation support or things like that on the measuring and monitoring side of trying to understand the impact. And then other types of nonprofits. It could be nonprofits in your same sector that are also really important collaborators. I know that sometimes people think of other nonprofits in their sector as competitors, but I really think, nonprofit work is very rarely a zero-sum game, right? There's most of the nonprofits who do similar work to you, or who are in your area, they may still be valuable partners in a whole host of ways, like writing letters of support for one another, or going in together for collaborative funding opportunities. And those can actually have a much greater impact by not being so narrowly defined or siloed. And speaking of silos, don't forget about the nonprofits that are in other sectors from you. I think sometimes when we think about our collaborators or our competitors, we're really thinking about the people doing, the same type of work as we're doing. But being a little creative, thinking about potential partnerships across different sectors can help you identify organizations that might want to have a similar social impact, but they come at it from a different angle. So, for example, my background, I have a background in public health. I'm in the health world, and in the health world, there are lots of opportunities to partner with people in the education sector. And that could be anything from, you want to open a school-based health center at an elementary school, or it could be you want to develop health workforce training programs, for underserved populations in a higher education setting. So there's all kinds of opportunities for collaboration, and that may actually be able to increase your impact.
And I'll also just add, if that's okay, Rachel, it is so right on. I think another difference when you look at sort of the universe of funding opportunities, foundations, family foundations, community foundations have a bit more appetite for risk. This may be a great idea and we don't know yet. Help us do a pilot. Corporate donors, even the most altruistic social impact partners really need the rubber to meet the road pretty quickly, because ultimately part of what's driving their engagement is a result that they can talk about and share. So one of the ways that you can do that and line that up is by saying, it's not just me out there. We actually have three people in this community, 5 people in this community, whatever that looks like, who know this is going to work. We all have the expertise. We're coming at this with the best folks. Help us fund this collaborative, and here's how it's going to be organized and why this is a super smart slam dunk play. And I think if you're looking at appetite for risk, your corporate funder, your corporate social impact partner is probably going to have the least appetite, and those things that Rachel just shared are going to really help make them feel more comfortable.
Yeah. That's a really good point. Yeah. Having other partners at the table may make a corporate funder feel more comfortable too, knowing that they're not the only ones going in on that. That's actually true for foundations as well, where, if they know that other funders have skin in the game or are working with you, it may make them feel a little bit more comfortable. But really some of it is that's why we build the relationships, right? So that you understand what is the risk tolerance of this organization, what are the things that make them excited, how can I introduce our mission and our programs and our services to them in a way that's engaging and that allows them to ask questions and that allows them to express what makes them tick and what their level of risk tolerance is, so that you can better have a application that really meets their needs and is going to check the boxes for them. And frankly, make sure that if you are not a fit for the foundation, if they do not have the tolerance for what you're doing, or they're not aligned programmatically or geographically, or for any other reason, you don't need to waste your time or energy writing grant applications to foundations that are not going to fund you. I give you permission to not submit applications that are never going to be funded. So, building these relationships up front with funders really helps you figure out who is going to be that great fit for us, who is really excited about what we're doing and wants to be in partnership with us, and who, may be a very good foundation, but they're not for us. And then you don't need to write an application to them.
Yeah. Thank you both so much for widening our scope again of what it means to have social impact partnership. And it can be with so many different people. Emily, you even mentioned before how our social impact partnerships can impact individual givers, major donors, board members who want to see that we have a collaborative approach and that we're being as strategic as possible. So zooming back in, Rachel, I'm wondering, are there benefits to foundation relationships specifically beyond just increased grant funding? And you were just kind of like teasing us a little bit with that.
Yeah.
What are some of those benefits?
Right. Yes. Obviously, increased chances at grant funding is sort of the thing we all think of when we think of building a relationship with a foundation. Oh, that will increase our odds at winning a competitive grant. They'll understand our programs better. We'll know, we'll customize it for their needs. But yeah, staying connected to foundations can have a whole host of other benefits. It can lead to some very valuable insights for you and for them. So funders can be very valuable sources of information about what they're seeing in the field. Of course, they fund a variety of different nonprofits doing different initiatives. So they may have thoughts for you about, how you might adjust your program to be more successful. They might have ideas of other foundations or other organizations you should collaborate with. And then at the same time, of course, you can be a really valuable source of information for foundations about the on-the-ground needs. You can share, those root causes Emily was referencing. You can share the challenges that your program has faced, the needs, the everyday needs that your clients or your participants are facing. You can share how they could have a bigger impact with their funds and give them some, I don't want to say constructive criticism, but you could give them some feedback of, multi-year awards would allow us to do this, or general operating funds would allow us to do this. So you can really, in many ways, have a dialogue with them that can lead to valuable insights for everyone. And actually, Emily kind of mentioned pilots and some more risky things, but we have seen many instances where cultivating ongoing relationships with foundations can position nonprofits for, all kinds of cool opportunities that are not strictly like applying for a competitive grant. So a funder might invite some select grantees to be part of some sort of pilot program or part of a learning collaborative with other nonprofits to build capacity around a topic. They sometimes foundations highlight their grantees in webinars like this, or in newsletters or outreach or marketing, so they can help you get greater visibility. There's also funders that push out proactive funds or rapid response grants to their existing grantees if they know that those are kind of going to be strong partners that will be able to use those funds rapidly and responsibly. And we've actually seen this quite a bit in the last year with COVID, especially again in the health space that I'm in. Foundations know which grantees are going to be able to rapidly leverage and deploy those dollars in response to a crisis. And so there have been many cases where foundations are proactively giving out money to organizations that they've already built a relationship with. So you want to constantly be building the types of relationships that allow foundations to think of you when they have a cool pilot initiative or some sort of, rapid response funding to give out.
Absolutely. Yeah, Emily, I'm curious if that sparked anything for you, in particular with benefits or like COVID related shifts that you've noticed or seen with companies.
So I think, one of the things that we talked about with our clients, obviously in 2020, everybody became a disaster relief funder, right? If you think about it. And so what do you do with that? And I think there was an inclination for many funders, especially on the corporate side, to, essentially stop doing whatever they were doing before and then shift to a COVID relief strategy for local community players, which is intuitive, but at the same time, it meant that the thing that you were doing before that mattered to you, mattered to your organization, especially if you had social impact roots, that you were really trying to effectuate a specific change, those organizations still needed your support. And so one of the things that we recommended people, really think about was if you had grant restricted funds that were going to a specific area, but COVID made it moot, go back, visit with those same partners. The goals that you had in 2019 are probably going to be quasi similar to the goals that you have in 2021. They're going to be better, more interesting, or 2022 and beyond. You're going to want those key NGO partners on the ground to exist, in the future. So how do you make sure that they stay whole, that they stay healthy? If there were long-term strategic plans that maybe COVID gives people the space to participate in, large capital improvements. It's really hard if you're a big institution with a ton of traffic every day to redo your floors. Oh, you know what? Good timing. We're going to redo them this year. I mean, that's a silly sort of example, but how do you go back and shift your funding from restricted dollars to general purpose dollars, but really work strategically with the partner was something that we saw that really came out of COVID. And then the other piece I think was trying to help support with expertise in a different way. You saw a lot of technology companies coming in with in-kind resources, like Zoom, for example, helping to make sure that people could have activations online. We worked on a really cool partnership with a legal aid organization that worked on domestic violence to help with one of the corporate partners that's our client, support them coming online and doing pro bono advocacy virtually, and supported the trainings and supported getting the technology grants so that they were set up to do that. And they were one of the first legal aid organizations in the country to do it. And we said, well, wow, that's cool. What if we give you additional grant dollars so that you can then teach all of the other DV organizations what you learned and help them grow more quickly? So I think it just helped people be more creative, more vulnerable, more interested in like what was going on. And I actually think that the ability to get on Zoom and having that be something that was more normalized also helped, because you could not just like hold on for a site visit that maybe happens on a quarterly basis or twice a year. You could pop on and in real time see what's going on in somebody else's world and help them help your partners make effective decisions in real time.
Yeah, that's fascinating. And I'm wondering for everyone else on this call, who are you partnering with? Has that changed in the last year for any of you? Did that spark any new creative collaborative partnerships? Did that change the way you're thinking about 2021 partnerships? We'd love to hear in the chat who your organization or cause is partnering with. Shifting gears here now to part 2, we're going to get a little bit more into the practical side of things so that we can give attendees some takeaways. So focusing in first on foundations, Rachel, how can nonprofits cultivate strong relationships with them?
Well, I always recommend that building your relationship start with a conversation, right? That's how all relationships start. So I encourage nonprofits to not be afraid to have a call with a foundation. The people at foundation, the people who work there are people, right? They're just people. You don't need to be afraid to talk to them. I know a lot of people are intimidated, but their job's to give out money in alignment with the foundation's mission. So they are usually more than willing to speak with you, to understand the amazing work that your nonprofit's doing. And, to points others have made, it's really not that different than speaking to board members, to speaking to donors, your volunteers, other stakeholders. You have the capacity to talk to foundations. So don't be afraid to speak with them on the phone or on Zoom. And I always tell people not to be afraid, but maybe because of my generation, I don't like cold calling people. I don't like calling them up out of the blue. So I always prefer to reach out by email to a foundation project officer to schedule a specific time to have that introductory call. And I like to make foundation staff's lives as easy as possible by, maybe giving a couple time slots or a calendar scheduling tool link like Calendly. If it's a bigger foundation, you can offer to the project officer to connect with their administrative assistant, but really just try to make their lives easy and get that call scheduled. And I guess just as a plug, I'll go through a few highlights, but I actually teach the ins and outs of scheduling and holding relationship building conversations with foundations in a course on grants. We have a whole module just on cultivating relationships with funders and tools and templates for doing that outreach, sending that email, preparing yourself for a call, having the call, et cetera, troubleshooting. So at any rate, so once you've got a call scheduled, you do need to prepare yourself for it. And I like to recommend highlighting 1 or 2 programs that you think are going to be a fit based on what you have learned in your research into the foundation. So you want to have already reviewed their website, reviewed their 990s carefully to see who they've been funding before and at what levels and so forth. You want to understand their giving priorities and their mission. And you want to become really fluent in describing your work and your program, whatever program or programs you're pitching, not just in the terms that you use that resonate with your mission, but really in terms of the foundation and their mission and their priorities. And I'm sure that there'll be some commonalities with how you speak with corporations, but it really is about making sure that they understand the alignment with what they are seeking to do. So I like to use the example of like if your organization does a behavioral health, mental health group program for adolescent girls. So if you're talking to a foundation and their mission is to empower women and girls, you might say something like, we've got this great behavioral health program that we just launched for adolescent girls, and it really empowers them. Whereas if you're talking to a foundation and their mission is to improve access to mental health services, you might say something like, we've got this great group program we just launched, and it's helping adolescent girls get better access to mental and behavioral health services, right? It's a really subtle shift. You are still completely honestly describing your same program, but you're just making that connection crystal clear to jumpstart the relationship. And you're using their language, you're kind of framing your program in their language just as a way to make it a little bit easier to connect. I guess just a couple other things, like one of the other really important things to do on a relationship building call with a foundation, maybe the most important thing, is to really listen, right? So you are there to share information about your organization and your programs, but you really want to understand the foundation as well. So I always like to, invite them. I'd enjoy getting to learn a little bit more about your foundation's priorities and how you think this work might be aligned with them. Something along those lines to really invite them to share, and then stop talking and just listen, which is very hard for me because I am chatty. But you really want to listen. You want to listen and hear what the foundation has to say. You want to listen for the right match between what you're trying to accomplish in the world and what they're trying to do, and hear if they're coming back in alignment with what you proposed, or if they're coming back with something else. And this is really important because also you may find that there is, potentially an area of misunderstanding or something that you need to clarify. For example, maybe you are talking about something like a diabetes education program that you're doing, and a funder might say something like, we're not funding education right now, just direct health services. And that might be an opportunity for you to sort of politely clarify, oh, this is actually a direct healthcare intervention program designed for patients with diabetes. Make sure they understand it's not like a diabetes awareness thing or just a general education thing about diabetes. And that can be really valuable because it will help you understand if maybe there's aspects of your program that aren't clear to others. Maybe there are things you can avoid in a grant application to them or to other people that might be misunderstood. And also just to sort of really double down on what's going to be impactful, what you really want to make sure they understand about the work that you're doing. So it gives you that opportunity if you're in dialogue with them. And I guess, the last tip I would share is that it isn't just about the introductory call. I've been talking about having an introductory call, but in a conversation before you submit a grant to a foundation, but we really want to keep those lines of communication open. We want to have ongoing conversations with funders after grants are awarded, before reports are submitted, throughout the year. You really want to stay in touch so you can share updates with them about the programs they funded, even if it's not the official reporting time. Maybe things have changed in your world and you're going to have to use the funding a little bit differently. Obviously, again, to the COVID point, that happened to a lot of people. Funders are people. They were aware of COVID. This was no surprise to them that your in-person program maybe had to be retooled a little bit. But share updates with them throughout the year so there aren't surprises, and so that they understand, we're trying to deal with having to pivot our diabetes education program online, and here's how we've done it, and this is why we need to use your funds a little bit differently. Make that a conversation so that there aren't any surprises, and they really understand, and they better understand what's going on. And that will allow you to also share insights that you've learned from program implementation that might be helpful for them to know what's going on in the real world, in the field. And it also, gives you opportunities to, if you stay in touch with them, share other opportunities for them to partner with you, right? Because as we mentioned, it's not just about the grants. Certainly, if you're doing an event with Givebutter, you can invite your partners, to your foundation partners, to attend or to sponsor. There are a lot of other ways that they may wish to participate in the work that you're doing. And so really having open lines of communication can help with that. And I've really found, a lot of the nonprofits I work with have found that over time, these sort of main foundation partners that they work with closely start to better understand them. They'll start to suggest programmatic ideas, suggest expansion areas. They share lessons learned that they're learning from their other grantees, and they want to make sure they'll offer funding for new areas of work. They'll connect you to other people. So again, all of those kind of ancillary benefits we talked about before, the more you're building relationships with them by keeping in touch when it's not just like application season, the more that they will be in dialogue with you about, these other opportunities.
Oh, so good. So many helpful tips for going above and beyond and making it easy for our foundation partners. Emily, did that spark anything for you? Anything that you would add to that from your perspective?
For sure. So, everything that Rachel shared about how to steward strong relationships with foundations, absolutely ditto for working with corporate partners. The one thing that I would add when you're looking at it through the corporate lens, and this is the social impact piece, right? Like, so if if there's a grants officer at a company and they give away $10,000 to everybody in this zip code, and you're going to apply for your 10K this year and you've always gotten it, like you do that. That doesn't necessarily fall under the advice that I'm about to give. If you're trying to steward a social impact partnership where you've identified your theory of change as a not-for-profit organization, the work that needs to be done in the community, what are the things that fall outside of your sweet spot as an organization that a corporation could uniquely fulfill, or could uniquely provide in kind, could uniquely provide vis-a-vis spending power, their bully pulpit, and I'll provide an example, and approach those partners, as Rachel shared, teeing up an opportunity, but leaving some white space, saying, here's the thing that we're trying to accomplish. Funny thing is, we're missing this muscle. We're never going to have it. It's not who we are as an organization. It's not appropriate. It's not what our charter is for. But it's something that you all do every day. And if you gave us a grant of X so that we could build out this platform to help bring you in as a business and supply Y, we think this could be something that would be beneficial for everybody. Not only does it show that this work can work, but it's bringing you in a unique, innovative way, et cetera. So here's an example, and I included it in the blog post that'll go up today, maybe some point this week. So, there's a company called Bumble. They're a giant dating app. They have an audience now of like 40 million people or something insane. It's huge. Their focus is on healthy relationships. The whole business started by helping in heteronormative couples, the woman to initiate wanting to connect. And that's kind of the basis of their reason for existing. So, extrapolate out, empowered relationships are healthy relationships. They're free of abuse. They're free of certainly domestic violence. And they partnered with a national domestic violence provider that had a message that they wanted to share, a hotline access, toolkits and resources. There was a grant, a funding opportunity for sure that helped the National Domestic Violence Organization build out a bit more information. But really the most valuable thing that Bumble did was linking to that resource, promoting it, bringing them onto their community, and socializing these resources and opportunities for that organization. And then that organization is able to say to other funders, foundations, government organizations, et cetera, we have an audience of 40 million people that we can reach through these opportunities. We want to show that this work is working, pilot with us, government on this, pilot with us, foundation on that. And it creates a whole new tool in their toolkit for that success. If they would have approached the conversation saying, hey, give us a grant so we can do the thing that we do, and not opened the conversation for that larger, more dynamic opportunity, it would have been a missed opportunity for both parties. So, in the social impact universe, thinking about that question, what do you do? What do I do? How can we help each other do our things better together for the betterment of society and the benefit of our organizations? Let's start that conversation. That's a very interesting place to play. And I think where, so many organizations want to be, it's really dependent on your match. So it takes a special partnership. You can't do that with everybody. Right. So the other kind of last piece of advice is hold that card for when it's real. you can't approach everybody to do everything all the time. That's not how the world works. Your resources are not infinite, they're finite. Your time is finite. So really thinking strategically about the people who are in your sphere of influence, folks on your board that have specific relationships that might be relevant, geographic connections that you have. Hey, you're headquartered in our city. We're headquartered in our city. We're both trying to do the same thing here. Let's do it together. Those sorts of that pre-work that helps you get to the conversation to have the more dynamic, more sophisticated version of that partnership talk, I would say is the only thing that I would really add to what Rachel already shared, which are the baseline of good partnerships.
Wow. Okay. I'm just soaking it in here with everybody. Shifting gears here to companies, how can nonprofits cultivate relationships with companies?
Yeah. And I, touched on that. Sorry, I probably should have held some of my my fire for this last question. Again, just to kind of recap, not all companies are created equal. You've got small mom and pop organizations that are in your community that want to do good, that want to, show up. But they're not going to be able to write big checks necessarily. If they do, it's going to be meaningful for them, but it's not necessarily going to move the needle on your operating costs. Meet people where they're at. I think creating a document that's a catch-all that everybody gets the same thing, and there's kind of this, closed universe of how you work with people doesn't make sense. For your local community companies, great. For people who are regionally connected to where you are, but are headquartered somewhere else, that's going to be a different conversation. For partners that really kind of touch on this social impact piece that we just discussed, that's going to be a different kind of conversation. So knowing your audience and really coming at it with a thoughtful lens, I think is the most important piece. And then the other piece that's unique in the company landscape as compared to what Rachel was talking about, not every corporation has a CSR department or a philanthropy department or a major gifts officer. So you may be talking to somebody who's in human resources. You may be talking to somebody in marketing or somebody in communications. So I think approaching those conversations with a bit of empathy to say, hey, I know you sit in communications. Here are the stories that I think we could tell together if we knock this out of the park. Hey, I see that you sit in HR. You're probably looking for employee engagement opportunities and some volunteerism opportunities. Here are the ways that we bring people in and do meaningful service. And it's not a one-off thing. We could build a 5-year, 10-year landscape where we're really building something in our community that's going to scaffold, and you all can be the named partner with us, join, so I think it's, again, tapping into Rachel's earliest point, which was like, know your audience, do your homework, and show up in a way that is connected to those data points, not, showing up in a generic way, are really going to build the strongest relationships. And then the craziest thing, and you would be shocked, I know nobody on this call would do this, because corporate partnerships are not as tightly organized oftentimes, a foundation, you have your deliverables, there's a date where you have your reports due, et cetera. I think corporate giving tries to do that. They don't always do it. Sometimes the check may get cut and there's no deliverable owed. You still need to follow up and say, thank you so much. Here is what happened. Would love to take you on a site visit. Here's a video of Cynthia, who was one of our beneficiaries, telling you how awesome this was and thanking you. And let's get on the phone again. We know we got our grant last September. We would love to reapply. But that follow through, I would guess as much as 70% of the partnerships that I've seen don't do that piece when it isn't required. And that's crazy. So at the very least, if you take nothing away from this conversation, if a corporation does something meaningful for you, follow up and let them know how it went.
Yes. So good. I see Rachel.
Yeah. 100% to that.
Yeah. What would you add? Did that spark anything for you, Rachel?
I agree with it 100%. The whole knowing your audience and understanding what is motivating the HR professional or the marketing professional to have this conversation with you as a nonprofit, I think is so important. And I also love what you were saying about the missing piece, that sort of, if there is a missing piece of the puzzle that they can fulfill, it's just sort of, ask for that or to make that clear that they're that missing link. I actually use some of that same kind of like terminology or conceptual piece for just about writing grant applications, just to help the foundation know that what you're seeking to do with their money is the missing piece of the puzzle. You have everything figured out. All you need is this one thing that they can help fund. And I love the idea that that's actually applicable to other types of partnerships with companies as well, that there may be some, secret sauce that they have 40 million users on their platform or whatever it is that missing piece. And if you articulate it, you can help them understand that.
And sometimes it's a really easy thing for the organization, for the company to say yes to, in a way that they might not be able to say yes to a grant, or they could say yes to a smaller size grant and then give you the thing that's your missing piece. And, obviously getting to yes and starting that partnership is an important component.
It's just so fascinating to hear you both speak to your expertise with foundations and companies and how much crossover there is between forming these powerhouse relationships. Goes back to so many foundational principles of cultivating relationship, being genuine and authentic, scaling for good. So many takeaways that you've given us. We're going to shift gears here to live Q&A, because I would think that not only does it spark more questions for me, y'all know I have questions for days and I can keep going, but if you all have questions for Rachel and Emily, we'd love for you to drop them in the Q&A and answer them live for you. So just to give you an idea, these can be really general questions that just got the wheels turning for you, or if you want to learn more about this topic, these can also be really specific. You can be selfish. If you want some live coaching for a grant that you're working on or a company that you want to partner with, that's your dream partner, well, you have two experts here that could help you. So don't be afraid to ask specific questions for your organization or really general that could serve everybody on this call. So while we wait for you all to drop your fantastic questions in the Q&A, we were just talking about practicals. My question for both of you are, what are some affordable tools, like some practical tools to get people, if they're leaving this call and they're like, okay, I wrote down a million notes, I'm ready to get going, I have all these ideas, I need to get the board on a call next week. Where should they be organizing all of this? Are there any go-to tools that you recommend for nonprofits, for foundations, or companies?
Sure. So do you want me to get started?
Yeah.
Obviously, this is not meant to be a plug, but I think it is a helpful resource and tool. So, as we shared at the top of the hour, Ethos Giving, my firm supports companies that are looking to do good, and we created a resource called the Good Brief that is on our website. I think everybody's going to get it after this call via an email. But basically, the Good Brief helps your corporation. So this is a tool for corporations, and we'll get to how it's relevant for our nonprofit partners. It's a tool for corporations to really go through and have a conversation that helps them digest what they do in the world, how that can be a benefit for society, what they're missing in their toolkit, and then who they can work with to bring that toolkit together, where some of that's by providing grants, some of it's maybe working on legislative activations, and you'll sort of see in the Good Brief the way that we help people digest those conversations. Happy to even maybe update it coming off this call if there's enough demand in the nonprofit community, but you can very quickly reverse those questions and figure out how you become the answer to them. And then to the extent that you are the solution, think about how, who in my network, which kind of companies are asking these questions for whom I can be the solution downstream for their social impact agenda, and then try to figure out how to matchmake with those partnerships.
So good. Yes, absolutely. And you have your handout, the visual that goes with it is also really helpful for people like me who are visual learners. So we'll definitely attach that in the follow-up email for all of you who attended today. Rachel, what would you add?
Yeah, well, as I mentioned earlier, I do have a course that's chock full of tools for every phase of the grants life cycle, from identifying prospects to cultivating relationships, writing applications. the whole kit and caboodle. But you don't need to necessarily start really sophisticated when you're starting with some of these things. You can use Excel or Google Sheets to track your foundation relationships or your grants. You don't necessarily need to. There are tools like Grant Hub, which is kind of like a relationship management tool for grant funders. You don't need to get Grant Hub if you're only doing 1 or 2 applications a year. You can really start simple. I do recommend that if you're going to get more into grants and to relationships with foundations, that you have some sort of structured way of identifying them. So Foundation Directory Online is our favorite it's kind of the gold standard, in my opinion, for places to look up foundations and to see their giving history and so forth. But it does take a subscription. So sometimes people aren't quite there yet in their organization.
Great point. We are getting some awesome questions here in the Q&A. So we'll just do these like lightning round, 1 or 2 minutes. First one's from Susan. Hey, Susan, we're happy you're here. Susan's question is, we're sometimes hesitant to ask for event sponsorship if a corporation already funds programs with a grant. I'm hearing you think that's okay to pursue.
Yeah. So, the partnership piece is the most important. If you know that Susie would be offended if you did not call her to say, we're doing this event, no pressure, but do you want to join us? Then call Susie. There are other funders that only really want to hear from you on the most important thing, and you should, abide by those goals. So it may be when you have a partnership that you're excited about, what I would say to the corporate partner is, hey, we do events. We have these other things during the year. Would you like us to let you know about them? Would it be helpful for you to have your logo on these kinds of things? If not, we'll stick to column A.
Mm-hmm.
I was going to basically exactly say that. So yeah, you should always feel free in a call with a foundation to say, would you like to be on our newsletter list? Some want to, some don't. Would you like to be informed of when we've got event sponsorship opportunities? Some do, some don't. So do what is right for that relationship.
Yes. Awesome. So we have Susan here. Susan, thanks for your question, which is, what is the feeling on multi-year gifts? This is something I would like to begin to ask for during the grant process for a corporate partnership program to launch an ongoing relationship. Do companies and foundations welcome these type of gifts? Thoughts? Thank you.
Rachel, do you want to start?
Yeah, so thankfully, more and more organizations are open to multi-year giving and, more unrestricted. I think historically, a lot of foundations have given very narrowly, and I think more and more are realizing the importance of general operating funds and having kind of multi-year gifts so that nonprofits can really scale and do the things that they need to do that sometimes take a little bit longer than the 12 months. But I think that this is something that you really need to, again, understand the organization that you're talking to. So if you look at their website or look on Foundation Directory Online and it says that they only give 1-year programmatic gifts, you can still raise that in a conversation, but just be prepared to understand that that is probably not something that they're doing, and make sure that they understand that you have read their website. You are not asking for something that is ineligible, and that you just want to be in dialogue about them. Is this something that you're looking at in the future or you would consider? But fortunately, there are some foundations that will consider that.
Yeah, same on the corporate side, check. If it's not clear from their website, you can always ask. And something that might be the safest option is to say, hey, we know that entering into a multi-year gift at this point might be premature. Just so you know, if we had a 3-year commitment, let's do the pilot this year. If we had a 3-year commitment going forward, here's the other type of funding we could call down, and here's why it would make this work better. Just want to plant the seed. And then that way you're sort of helping people understand that this is your preference, but you're not making them feel like if they don't do it this way, the door is closed.
I like that. Kind of keep the door slightly open, but let them know
And it is easier with someone that you have a relationship with already to ask for that multi-year gift. If they've given you 2 years in a row of 1-year gifts, it does make it a little bit easier to have that conversation.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. We have a question here from Abba. We are a new nonprofit, how exciting for you, wanting to provide early developmental screening for kids 0 to 3 in Maryland to identify delays and disabilities at the earliest. But early childhood intervention is with Department of Education and intervention with HHS. So maybe the question here is, can we speak more, maybe Rachel, could you speak more to like some tips and tricks you might have for them?
Yeah, I think so. If you're a very new nonprofit, again, you may not quite be in the stage of being able to look at government grants and contracts, but certainly if your work goes across multi agencies in government, it's worth looking at both streams of funding and seeing if you might be a fit for either one. I don't know enough about your organization about if you're already like getting Medicaid reimbursement for early intervention services, or if you like got your 501c3 status yesterday. But I think grants and especially government grants are often not the easiest place to start. And it might be easier to initially get some seed funding from individuals, and maybe there might be a corporation that's really well aligned, or a school. And then if you get certified to provide early intervention services, or you are able to become part of whichever is the appropriate state agency in terms of contracts and reimbursement and so forth, that'll really jumpstart being able to ask other types of foundations and corporations for funds and partnerships.
Great advice. Thank you. Let's hear it for our amazing panelists, Emily and Rachel, in the chat. Thank you both so much for joining and for giving us so much to think about. What an inspiring conversation about building powerhouse partnerships. I hope everybody else is leaving this call feeling as energized as I am right now. If you want to get in touch with Emily or Rachel, simply go to their website. So that would be ethos-giving.com or leadinghealthyfutures.com. And remember, we always send a recording of the slides after if you want to simply click the link in the slide after this webinar. As a reminder, we're going to send a quick survey at the end of this webinar. If you could please fill that out and give us your feedback, that would be really helpful. It's just one question, takes 10 seconds. We want to get your feedback. And thank you again, everyone, for joining us for another Givebutter webinar. We'll see you again in 2 weeks on June 16th in honor of Pride Month. The topic will be on how to increase LGBT donors and board members. So we hope to see you there. Thanks again for joining, and happy fundraising. Bye, everybody.